What if the kid the whole school once laughed at turns out to be the musical genius America's about to honor? Tyler Morgan, a quiet black boy from the Brookside neighborhood, was once called up on stage as a joke. Everyone expected him to fail, just so they could have something to laugh at. But in that very moment, as he placed his hands on the piano, their world, from the principal to the teachers to the entire elite education system, began to crumble. He didn't just play a piece of music, he composed it. No one taught him, no one coached him. There was only the memory of his mother, nights spent playing in the dark, and a longing that had never been acknowledged. But Tyler didn't stop there. He didn't choose the spotlight. He chose to return to Brookside, the place he grew up, to open a music class for children who had once been silenced, just like him. From a simple melody, Tyler Morgan sparked a movement. A national television network called it the underground education revolution of America. But to the kids he teaches, he's simply the first person who made them believe they deserve to be heard. And in the words of Professor Linda Halperin, an education expert at Harvard, if a child has to play until their hands tremble just to be seen as worthy, the fault isn't with them, it's with the place that's scoring them. And here's the question that should stay with us for the rest of this video. If Tyler hadn't been mocked that day, would we have ever known we nearly overlooked a genius? If this story touched you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and comment your thoughts below. Because maybe, just maybe, a few words you leave today could be the reason someone out there keeps playing the song of their life. On a chilly Monday morning in late October, the atmosphere at Fair Hill Academy seemed suspended in the cold glow of autumn light. Crimson leaves fell evenly along the brick path leading to the main building, where students in their silver-gray uniforms were shuffling into the auditorium for the school-wide mandatory assembly. No one looked particularly thrilled. They were used to long-winded speeches, formal announcements, and the so-called impromptu performances that were never truly impromptu. But that morning, something was different. Principal Raymond Collins stepped onto the stage with a smile that wasn't entirely friendly. He was known for being clever and somewhat arrogant, a man who believed that running a prestigious school was equivalent to managing the future of Vermont's wealthiest families. He wore a dark suit and a gold tie, the color he once described in last year's speech as representing confidence and distinction. "Before we close today's assembly," he said, holding the mic and sweeping his gaze across the auditorium with a calmness that felt rehearsed, "I thought we could end with a little surprise, something fun." A few students in the front rows leaned toward each other, whispering. Soft chuckles bubbled up from the middle rows. "We'll end with a musical performance, but not from the school band, and not from the choir either." He paused, letting the curiosity ripen. "It'll be from a very special individual, a student whom I believe we'll all want to hear." Something in the way he emphasized "want to hear" made a few teachers squint suspiciously. "Please welcome Tyler Morgan." The mood shifted instantly. Heads turned sharply toward the back of the auditorium, where, as always, students with the lowest academic standing were seated. Among them sat Tyler, skinny, quiet, barely noticeable. Tyler sat there, hands resting on his knees, his dark eyes unmoving. A few students burst into laughter. Someone whispered, "Is he serious?" Another student quickly lifted their phone to record the crowd's reaction and typed a caption, "Legendary performance coming up. Don't blink." Tyler stood up. No eye roll, no frown, no hesitation. He walked toward the stage with a composure that felt almost eerie. The auditorium collectively entered "watch the train wreck" mode. There were looks of disdain, tight-lipped smirks that said, "Poor kid, but let's see this." Someone nudged their friend. "What's this kid even gonna do?" The thing was, Tyler didn't belong here, at least not in their eyes. He lived in Brookside, a low-income neighborhood 15 miles south of the school, a place the Fair Hill parents politely referred to as an underdeveloped area. He took public transportation to school every day, not the chauffeured SUVs like most of his peers. His uniform often didn't meet the dress code: frayed shirt collars, an old tie, patched sneakers. But those were just surface-level details. What truly bothered people was Tyler's gaze, a gaze that refused to bow. He didn't beg. He didn't explain. He didn't make excuses. He didn't play the victim. And that made him the perfect target, because nothing unsettles the privileged more than a poor kid who won't lower his head. Tyler stepped onto the stage. He glanced at the grand piano in the center of the spotlight, a brand new Steinway, polished like no one had ever touched it. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at the principal. He just walked over, pulled the bench, and sat down. The entire room held its breath. He placed his hands on the keys. A quiet laugh came from the back. A mocking voice muttered, "Don't break a key now." No reaction. No comeback. Just Tyler Morgan, seated on stage like he belonged there. Principal Collins stood off to the side, holding the microphone. His voice, half amused and half dismissive, rang out, "Take it away, Mr. Morgan." Still, Tyler said nothing. The stage lights fell on his face, highlighting its sharp, youthful features. And suddenly, a few people in the crowd realized they had never really looked at him before. Then he closed his eyes. Not to escape, but as if summoning something. 3 seconds of silence, longer than normal, thicker. Enough for Ms. Brenner, the music teacher seated in the left wing, to lean forward in her chair. Enough for the students live streaming on their phones to stop recording, afraid to ruin the moment. Enough for those who were ready to laugh, to suddenly feel unsure. And at exactly the third second, Tyler struck the first key. It wasn't music yet, just a single note, but it wasn't off. It wasn't awkward, and it definitely wasn't funny. It was deep, clear, and resonant, like the first raindrop falling into a still lake before the storm. Before Tyler Morgan's fingers ever touched the piano keys in Fairhill Academy's auditorium, before the disinterested stares and the phones poised to record by the school's elite students, there was once a quiet boy living on the third floor of a low-income housing complex in Brookside. There, beneath the dim glow of street lamps and the occasional honk of late-night traffic, sat an old piano with a few cracked keys, and a woman, Lorraine Morgan, who after every shift at the laundromat would return home and play for her son. No one at Fairhill knew Lorraine. To the outside world, she was just a middle-aged black woman, a widow working double shifts to raise her only son. But to Tyler, she was everything, the first and last person who ever truly saw something in him. Not grades, not accolades, but music, something quiet inside him, waiting to be lit. Lorraine had once dreamed of becoming a pianist. She studied at a small community college just outside New York, but had to drop out when she became pregnant with Tyler. What followed were years of juggling jobs, bills, hospitals, and rejection letters. The only piano she ever owned was an old Yamaha P45, donated by a local church. The keys clacked and the sound was uneven, but she called it Mama's Pride. Tyler grew up with that sound, not from speakers, not from Spotify, but from the winter nights when his mother played Chopin's nocturnes or jazz melodies she composed from memory. Sometimes it was a hymn. Sometimes it was something no one had ever heard before. No matter how tired or drowsy he was, Tyler always tried to stay awake. He'd curl up on the sofa, eyes half closed, heart moving in sync with each note. Then one night, when Lorraine thought Tyler was asleep, she was playing when she heard a soft sound behind her. Turning around, she saw 8-year-old Tyler placing his hands on the keys beside her, mimicking her movements. The notes weren't correct, but the feeling was, and she understood. This child didn't learn by sight. He learned by ear and by heart. From that night on, music between them was no longer one-sided. Lorraine no longer played alone. Each evening, mother and son would sit side by side. Sometimes she played while he listened. Sometimes he attempted a short phrase, and she gently corrected him. No structure, no curriculum, just continuity, a quiet passing of flame. She once told Tyler on a night when the rain was pounding outside, "You don't have to become anyone, but if one day you need to say something and no one wants to listen, say it with music." Tyler didn't respond. He just nodded. Life in Brookside wasn't easy. No trees, no spacious parks. Public schools were underfunded. The neighborhood echoed with arguments, sirens, and the slam of metal gates. But Tyler never complained. When people asked, "Why are you so quiet?" he simply shrugged. They didn't know he spoke the most, at night, through the worn keys of an old piano. When he was 11, Lorraine was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Without proper insurance, they were limited to basic treatment at a local clinic. Tyler didn't understand all the medical terms, but he could tell from the way her breathing grew heavy, the way she slept more, and how she played less, that she was slipping away. During her final year, Tyler became her primary caregiver. He went to school in the mornings, worked part-time at Mr. Harlan's grocery in the afternoons, came home to cook, manage her medication, and only then, finally sit down to play. And somehow, music didn't leave him. If anything, it became clearer, more painful, and more real. When Lorraine passed, Tyler didn't cry much. He sat alone by the piano and played the very first tune she ever taught him, a nameless song, just scattered notes strung together by memory. But this time, he played it from start to finish without missing a single note. After the funeral, a neighbor asked him, "Who do you live with now?" Tyler simply said, "I live with my mom," then walked away. They didn't understand, but to Tyler she was still there, in the music, in every sound, in memory, in a promise. He moved in with a distant aunt, Lorraine's sister, also in Brookside, a different apartment, smaller and darker. She didn't care for music, didn't like the sound of piano, but she didn't stop him. He brought his keyboard, placed it by the window, pulled the curtain each night, and kept playing. The local public school had no music program. Tyler was accepted into Fairhill through a scholarship for low-income students with high potential. Not for music, but because of his unusually high reading and writing scores. He was quiet, reserved, and no one ever knew about his piano. Fairhill was a different world. Flawlessly clean, marble-tiled hallways, a music room with a brand new Steinway piano, but the door stayed locked, only opened under supervision. Tyler never asked to go in. He played in his mind, in memory, and every night, when the world slept, he played the piano his mother had left behind. No one knew, no one asked, and he never told, until that Monday morning, when Principal Collins called his name, and the entire school prepared to laugh. Tyler hadn't prepared for a performance. No one warned him, but something inside him didn't resist, didn't fight it. He just walked up, as if he'd walked that path 1,000 times before. And when he placed his hands on the keys, on that stage surrounded by wealthy kids beneath disdain masked in civility, under the weight of all those eyes waiting for him to fail, there was only one image in his mind, his mother, in the rain, smiling, playing the song without a name, and Tyler carrying all the years behind him, all the quiet nights by the window in Brookside, all the pain that words could never hold, began to play, not for them, but for her and for himself. Among the hundreds of people present in Fairhill's auditorium that morning, there was one man who didn't laugh, didn't gasp, and wasn't surprised when the first notes from Tyler Morgan's piano filled the room. Mr. Leroy Bennett, the elderly janitor who had worked at the school for over 30 years. He didn't wear a suit or a tie, just a worn brown coat, an old knit cap, and soft leather shoes that carried him quietly down the hallways each morning before 6 a.m. People were used to seeing him pushing trash bins, wiping windows, reminding students to pick up candy wrappers, and occasionally waving to parents who never remembered his name. But to Tyler Morgan, Mr. Leroy wasn't just a janitor. He was the first person who ever called him an artist. They met on the first Wednesday morning of the school year. Tyler had arrived early, far too early, because he didn't want to ride the same bus as the students who whispered behind his back. He sat alone on the steps behind the music room, a spot most people overlooked. And then Mr. Leroy appeared, broom in hand, eyes unhurried. He looked at Tyler for a long moment and asked, "You writing music, kid?" Tyler was surprised. In his hands was only a small notebook with a few scribbled chords. "I'm just sketching a few notes," he said softly. "Sketching or writing, either way, you're creating sound," Leroy replied, his voice deep and even. From that day on, they started talking more. Not often, not loudly, but in quiet fragments, scattered like stray notes in an unfinished symphony. Some days, Mr. Leroy would hand Tyler a scrap of paper with an old jazz tune. Other times, he'd tell stories about black musicians who played in New Orleans back in the 60s. He never asked why Tyler didn't play piano at school, never questioned how the boy knew so much about music. Instead, he spoke of himself. He told Tyler that in his youth, He played saxophone in a street band, used to perform at nightclubs in Mississippi, and almost signed with a small record label, until the war took him away. "When you were born," he said one rare quiet afternoon, "music already chose you. Just don't let the world make you forget that." Tyler didn't say much in response, but inside him something quietly settled. One time Tyler asked, "Why do you work here?" "With your past, you could have," Mr. Leroy chuckled. "Could have done a lot, but sometimes what you do ain't as important as where you stand. I chose to be here, 'cause maybe one day a kid like you would show up. In a world where teachers were too busy to notice who didn't raise their hand, and classmates too distracted to care whether someone stayed silent out of fear or simply because they knew no one would listen. Leroy Bennett was the only one who stopped to hear the silence. And now, as Tyler's music held the entire auditorium in suspended breath, Mr. Leroy simply stood by the entrance, unsurprised, unshaken, just smiling. The smile of a man who had been waiting for this. A student nearby leaned in and whispered, "What the heck is happening right now?" Mr. Leroy didn't answer, because he knew this wasn't a miracle. It was a culmination of long unseen nights, of unspoken pain, of a boy who chose not to give up, even when the world never reached out to catch him. And now they were listening. They had no choice but to listen. But Mr. Leroy also knew this was only the beginning. The song wasn't over, and the price of being acknowledged, especially in a world that liked everything to stay by the book, would not come cheap. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, a forgotten prophecy, once whispered and tucked between brooms and glass cleaning cloths, was unfolding in front of a stage. "You'll make them listen," he had once told Tyler, and now he didn't need to say it again. There was a strange kind of stillness that swept across Fairhill Academy's auditorium the moment Tyler Morgan placed his hands on the piano keys. It wasn't the polite kind of silence that came with anticipation, nor the awkward hush before laughter. It was the stunned quiet of a crowd unsure of what they were supposed to feel. They had mentally prepared for a disastrous performance. They were ready to laugh. Phones were already raised, camera angles adjusted, and then Tyler struck a single note, just one, but it rang out with perfect force, a tone so rich and rounded that it felt as if the vast room itself had been forced to hold its breath. No one, not even those with years of music training, could have guessed that the first sound from that Steinway would come from him. The boy they'd once called invisible, selectively mute, or worse, probably not a good fit for this academic environment. Tyler didn't look at the audience. He didn't even look at his own hands. His eyes were gently shut, his facial muscles relaxed. His body was grounded, not stiff, but settled, as if he weren't sitting on a school stage at all, but within a world of his own, a space where it was just him and the piano, and nothing else. Then the piece began. It wasn't a famous song anyone could recognize, not some safe classical tune designed to win back a little grace. It was a melody no one had heard before, raw, honest, and carrying a sadness too complex to name. Tyler didn't play to impress. He didn't pound the keys. He didn't run fast arpeggios. He wasn't trying to shock anyone. But every note he pressed had purpose, had breath, as if he were telling a story with no words. And somehow, everyone could feel it. In the front row, a student named Drew, national piano competition winner, slowly lowered his phone. He had meant to capture his friend's face to laugh later, but he couldn't. Instead, he found himself staring at Tyler's hands. "What's he even doing?" someone whispered. No one answered. Music teacher Ms. Brenner furrowed her brow, listening intently as though trying to decode a mystery. She tapped her leg gently to the rhythm. After a few seconds, she murmured under her breath, "There's no arrangement like this." The melody continued. The lower notes ushered in the middle section. Tyler's left hand moved like wind weaving through leaves, while his right hand spun a line of melody that pierced through the listeners' minds. Delicate, yet haunting. In Tyler's mind, there was no auditorium, no Principal Collins frozen in the back, no Mr. Leroy smiling quietly in the corner. All he saw was one image, his mother sitting by the window, streetlight casting shadows on her hands as they danced across an old keyboard, the music blending with the beat of his childhood heart. He wasn't playing someone else's piece. He was playing his own, a song he had written at 14 on the first night after his mother passed away. A song no one had ever heard, a song never notated, remembered only through feeling and tears. Why was he playing it now? Maybe because this was the realest moment of his life. Nothing left to hide, nothing left to hold back. If this was the one and only chance for others to see him, truly see, then he didn't want to show them a troubled student or a kid chosen as a joke. He wanted them to see a son trying to hold on to the last memory of his mother. The climax of the song arrived. The chords swelled, layered with intensity, but they stayed in rhythm, not clumsy, not chaotic. On the contrary, they were like waves of emotion crashing down, sweeping away every assumption and prejudice seated below. A girl in the audience instinctively grabbed the sleeve of the person next to her. No one said anything, but a few had tears forming. No one could explain why. They only knew. They felt something. Principal Collins, the architect of this surprise performance, stood frozen backstage, his eyes wide. His hand gripped the microphone but couldn't raise it. He didn't understand what he was seeing, didn't know what he had unleashed, and deep down, a strange discomfort crept in. Not because Tyler played well, but because he, the principal, had been so wrong. This was no longer a performance. This was a reclaiming of presence. Tyler, the student labeled difficult, at risk, a poor fit for the school, was now standing before them, not yelling, not arguing, not rebelling, just playing. And in doing so, he had silenced everyone. The final section of the piece began to slow. The lower notes returned, slower, deeper, like gentle touches on an old scar. Tyler's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from release. He was letting go of something he'd held too long. A final note rang out, not high, not dramatic, just a natural ending, like the last breath of a fading dream. And then, silence. No applause, no whispers, just a strange, extended quiet. Longer than any pause before. Tyler opened his eyes. He didn't look at anyone. He simply stood, adjusted the bench, and stepped down from the stage. As he passed the front row, someone murmured, He can actually play." Another student added, "Not just play, he plays like a pro." A teacher whispered, "No one taught him. He taught himself." But Tyler didn't hear. He just kept walking. Mr. Leroy, now stepping out from his usual corner, moved toward Tyler and gave him a slight nod. Tyler nodded back. No words needed. And then, like a spark igniting a chain reaction, someone clapped. Just one person, then two, then a whole row, then the entire auditorium. It wasn't the kind of polite applause reserved for school assemblies. It was real, the kind of applause that carried recognition, amazement, and quiet remorse. But for Tyler Morgan, none of that really mattered anymore. He had done what he needed to do. And more importantly, for the first time in his life, he had been heard. Not because someone asked the crowd to listen, but because they simply couldn't not listen. As the applause swelled through the auditorium at Fairhill, from scattered claps to a resounding ovation, the only person who didn't clap was the one who had orchestrated the entire performance, Principal Raymond Collins. He stood motionless behind the stage, microphone still in hand, his eyes locked on the now empty bench where Tyler Morgan had just been sitting. In his ears, the sound of applause seemed to fade, like waves crashing on a remote island where he now found himself stranded. He didn't understand what had just happened, but beyond the shock, deeper than surprise, was something else. Persistent, burning, a feeling he had ignored for years. Guilt. Every step Tyler had taken down that stage, every note he had played, was like a sharp needle piercing through the arrogant armor Collins had long used to protect a system built on bias, one he had been running for nearly 2 decades. Collins had listened to hundreds of students perform at Fairhill, kids trained by private tutors, raised in homes with in-house studios, performing at Carnegie Hall or the Kennedy Center by age 10. But none of them, not one, had ever made the auditorium go silent like this. None of them had ever made him, the principal, hold his breath and reflect. And yet it was Tyler Morgan. That name suddenly stirred up another. Lorraine Morgan. He didn't want to remember, but memories don't ask for permission. It was 2004. He had been Fair Hill's principal for just 2 years. Lorraine was a young woman, sharp-minded, full of determination, who came to see him with a special application for a music scholarship. She wasn't like the other parents. No Italian leather bag, no scheduled emails a week in advance, no connections on the board. She brought only one thing, the belief that talent doesn't require a wealthy zip code. He still remembered her eyes, direct, not pleading. "My son is 3 years old," she had said. "I'm not asking for money, I'm asking for a chance. For him to study music at this school. I'll do whatever it takes to prove I deserve it." He had rejected her, not because she wasn't qualified. Her file was impressive, but because she didn't align with the school's current image strategy. That was his way of pushing people out, without having to say anything cruel. After that meeting, he never saw Lorraine again, and he didn't give it much thought, until today, when Tyler Morgan, Lorraine's son, stepped onto the stage and used music to silence the very system that had once shut his mother out. Collins felt short of breath. No one noticed him. Everyone was busy talking about the performance. Some students still had tears in their eyes. A teacher whispered, "He's a true genius." Another replied, "He should have been performing last year." That last sentence hit like a slap, because the truth was, Tyler had asked to perform in last year's winter festival, and Collins himself had approved the final list. The name Tyler Morgan had been crossed out. No clear reason, just nothing particularly outstanding. Collins stepped back from the stage. He needed air. He had to leave the auditorium, not because of the crowd, but because of the voices now rising inside his head. "I turned his mother away. I crossed his name off the list. I made a talented child into a joke." He walked down the hallway, now quiet, and leaned against the wall. His hands trembled. His heart raced. This wasn't a feeling he, the head of an elite institution for nearly 20 years, was used to. But this time, he couldn't justify it, couldn't blame the system, couldn't point at a staff member. It was him. And the storm began. A confrontation between two versions of Collins, the principal, polished, composed, image-conscious, always acting by policy, and the man, standing alone in a hallway, heart heavy with the realization that he had failed to nurture a soul that should have been lifted long ago. If he had once believed that music was a tool for showcasing excellence, now he understood. It is the final language of truth. And Tyler had used that language to force him to face what he had long forgotten. Worth doesn't come from where you were born. It comes from how you rise when the world tries to bury you. Meanwhile, back in the auditorium, every eye still followed Tyler, who had quietly returned to his seat, emotionless, saying nothing. He was the same, still silent, still guarded, but no one saw him the same way anymore. In the rows below, a group of students whispered, "We had no idea he was like that." Another replied quietly, "No one ever asked. So how would we know?" And Mr. Leroy, the janitor, stood still, unmoved, unspeaking. He had seen this coming before any of them. As for Collins, he now stood in his office, staring at Tyler's file on his computer screen. He scrolled down. Guardian, Lorraine Morgan, deceased. Below that, a short note from the 9th grade academic advisor. Shows signs of strong musical interest. Recommend monitoring for potential development in the arts. Has not yet had opportunity to perform. Collins froze. Every opportunity missed. Not because of the system, not because of society, but because of people like him. People who say, "We believe in equal opportunity," but only offer it to those who already fit the suit they've pre-tailored. And now, with Tyler stepping into the light by himself, Collins knew. If he didn't act, this wasn't just a mistake, it was a moral failure. Fair Hill Academy's auditorium had yet to return to normal after Tyler Morgan's performance. The applause had faded, but the echo of the music lingered, in their eyes, in their breaths, and in the heavy silence shared by those who had laughed when he first stepped on stage. Tyler said nothing. He simply returned to his seat, arms slack, eyes fixed on the polished wooden floor. But this time, no one looked away. Some classmates glanced at him with a mix of awe and respect, a kind of gaze Tyler had never received in this place. At the teacher's row, Ms. Brenner remained frozen. She held her phone, but her eyes weren't on the screen. She was trying to recall, searching her memory for any piece she had ever taught, heard, or judged in competitions over the last 2 decades. She turned to the colleague beside her. "You recognize that piece?" He shook his head. "Not at all. I thought it was a new chamber work." Ms. Brenner frowned. Thematic development was too precise. There was a motif, counterpoint, even variation, but I've never heard it. She opened a classical music recognition app, typing in the main motif. No results. She tried rhythm inputs. Still nothing. She hummed a short melodic phrase. One result. No match found. Other students tried searching too, and slowly an astonishing truth began to emerge, like a thin curtain being drawn down inch by inch. A girl named Leah, a 10th grader and member of the state choir, turned to her friend. "It's not online." "What do you mean?" "It's not there. Nowhere. It's not Beethoven, not Chopin, not Debussy. It's nothing. He wrote it." "You're sure?" Leah nodded, her face pale. "I'm sure. I remember the modulation from the tonic to the subdominant. That transition, nothing in the archives has it. That was original." The whispers began to spread. "He composed that piece?" "No way. Who taught him?" "No one. He's self-taught." "So, that was the piece's first ever performance?" "Probably in the whole world." At that moment, Principal Collins had returned to the auditorium, his face pale, though still wearing a practiced composure. He walked to the faculty row and asked softly, "What piece did he just play?" Ms. Brenner turned, her voice hoarse. "I don't know, but I don't think it was published." Collins frowned. "What are you saying?" Very quietly, she replied, "I think it was an original composition." His hand clenched into a tight fist, not in anger, but in a mental collision. He had overseen countless music competitions, signed dozens of recommendation letters for students dubbed prodigies, but none had ever written an original piece from nothing and performed it like that, in front of the whole school, without a single person knowing. In that moment, he felt like he was standing between two worlds. One was the world he had built, tidy, ranked, predictable, with rubrics and approval lists. The other was a reality that had just crashed into him through undeniable sound. Genius doesn't need credentials to exist. And Tyler Morgan, the student he once regarded as a bureaucratic burden, had just rewritten the definition of value right in front of his eyes. In the back rows, some students began looking at Tyler as if he were some kind of alien being. But this time, not because he was different in a negative way, but because he was truly different. One whispered, "He's not like us." Another added, "Not like, because he's way beyond." No one dared to laugh anymore. Ms. Brenner stood up. For the first time in years, she walked directly to a student in the middle of an assembly. She approached Tyler, leaned slightly, and spoke in a soft tone, as if addressing a fellow musician. "You wrote that piece?" Tyler lifted his head, hesitant but not afraid. "Yes, ma'am, I did." "When?" "A year ago, after my mother's funeral." She froze, said nothing, only nodded, and pulled out her phone. "Can you send me the handwritten version?" Tyler reached into his jacket and pulled out a wrinkled slip of paper, penciled with melodic sketches. Not a formal score, but a system of symbols only he could interpret. She took it as if receiving sacred scripture, then returned to her seat, though her mind was still lost in the echoes of his music. In her head, a question began to form, one that would haunt her for years. If he hadn't been made the butt of a joke today, would we have ever known he was this gifted? The painful answer, maybe not, because Tyler didn't have a musical resume. No performance trophies, no private instructors. He had only a mother, an old piano, and memory. And in a place like Fairhill, those things are rarely enough. But this time, through a twist of irony, a staged joke, the truth shattered every mold. And as the assembly drew to a close, no one remembered the other performances. No one quoted the principal's speech. Everyone was talking about one thing: the untitled composition written by an unknown student that made an entire auditorium freeze. No one knew what the piece was called. Tyler had never named it, but those who were there would later refer to it by many names. Some called it the Symphony of Truth. Others called it Silent Rebellion. But to Tyler Morgan, it was just a whisper, a call to his mother, and an answer to the world. I exist, and I have something to say. Even if you've never listened before, if you felt something stir while reading this, you're not alone. Tyler's story reminds us that the quietest voices often hold the loudest truths. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Because who knows, your comment might just be the note someone else needs to keep playing their own song. That evening, a video of Tyler Morgan's performance surfaced online for the first time through a student's secondary Instagram account at Fairhill. No edits, no effects, just raw footage from a slightly shaky phone, slightly out of focus, but every note of the music rang clear. The video opened with muffled laughter, someone whispering, "The circus is about to start," and then silence the moment the music began. Within 2 hours, the clip hit nearly 20,000 views. By the next morning, it passed 200,000. By the following night, it crossed 1 million. But what made the video extraordinary wasn't just the numbers, it was the reaction from across the country. And the strongest reaction came from the place Tyler once called home. Brookside, a neighborhood long labeled as noisy, impoverished, or the place kids should avoid after 7 p.m., was now stirring with pride over a quiet, skinny boy who once shopped for groceries alone and was now suddenly on every front page. At the corner grocery, Mr. Harlan, the shopkeeper who once let Tyler work a few extra hours in exchange for ramen and milk, sat behind the counter, eyes glued to his phone screen. The clip played. The piano echoed through the tiny store. When the music ended, he didn't say a word, just nodded slowly and repeated 3 times. "That's the kid. That's the kid." On the 3rd floor of Evergreen Apartments, Ms. Marcy, the woman who used to scold Tyler for coming home too late, found herself crying for the first time while listening to music. She didn't understand classical compositions. She didn't even like classical music. But something in those sounds caught her throat. That boy, she thought. So many nights he passed my door without saying a word. Now he's made a whole school fall silent. At the Baptist church down the street, Pastor Harris, who once ran a summer music class that Tyler never attended, held a special prayer service. "We're not just witnessing talent," he said. "We're witnessing a soul, emerging from darkness to illuminate a system that had long ignored its light." The local news reported at midday, self-taught black student from Brookside goes viral for piano performance at elite Fairhill Academy. Viewers are calling him the Mozart of the 21st century. But Tyler didn't know any of that. He didn't check social media often. He didn't own a personal laptop. Every day after school, he returned to the same apartment, greeted his busy aunt, and stepped into his room, where the old keyboard lay quietly beneath the window, just like always. He didn't think he'd gone viral. He only knew he'd played his own music, honestly. And to him, that was enough. But Brookside didn't think it was a small thing. People who once saw him as part of the backdrop now looked at him like he was the center. A younger student, once punished for mocking Tyler's worn-out shoes, now bragged through the neighborhood. "I know him. He helped me find my keys behind the cafeteria." A small group organized a public screening of the video at the community center. There weren't enough chairs. They brought out plastic ones, set up a makeshift projector with a bedsheet. When the music played again, no one spoke. No one touched their food. No one checked their phone. They just listened, and at the final note, the entire block stood up and applauded. Not for a kid who plays well, but for themselves. Because for the first time, someone from Brookside had not only stepped into the world of the powerful, he made that world stop and listen. A mother in the neighborhood parents group said, "That wasn't just a song. That was a statement. Our kids can stand on equal ground, not because they're lucky, but because they have worth." Reporters began reaching out. Television networks requested interviews. A music producer from New York emailed the school asking to meet Tyler. But at Fairhill, Tyler remained quiet. He declined every meeting. ignored every press request. When a teacher asked, "Do you know you're famous right now?" Tyler simply replied, "I don't play music to be known. I play to be understood." In Brookside, that sentence became a slogan. They printed it on shirts, "Play to be understood." And then something no one expected happened. A parents group from Fairhill, the same one that once voted against admitting students from high-risk areas, issued a formal apology. They sent a letter to the Brookside community. "We were wrong to believe that a student's value is determined by where they come from. Tyler Morgan taught us a lesson deeper than any class could. No protests, no rallies, just music. And music did what 1,000 speeches could not. It changed hearts. It erased boundaries. It made people who had never looked each other in the eye finally listen. And through it all, Tyler stayed the same. Still quiet. Still playing every night. Still writing on scraps of paper. Still carefully taping his first composition to the wall, not to show off, but to remember. And one evening, while playing that piece again alone, he paused halfway, looked up at the window, and smiled. Because now he knew. Music hadn't saved him from Brookside. It had made the world look at Brookside. And see, that light had always been there. No one had turned on the switch. Until now. 3 days after Tyler Morgan's stunning performance, Meeting Room 2 at Fairhill Academy was filled to capacity. This was an unscheduled emergency session convened by the school's executive board. No students, no press, just Principal Collins, board members, and a handful of senior faculty. The air was cold, not from the AC, but from the guarded expressions of those seated around the table. On the wall, a large screen displayed bold headlines. "Boy from Brookside shakes the music world. Self-taught prodigy forces prestigious academy to rethink." Is the education system missing hidden gems? Collins stood beside the screen, holding a remote. His eyes were heavy. He hadn't slept properly in 3 nights. Not because of public scrutiny, but because of something heavier. The truth. The truth that he had been wrong. That Tyler wasn't an exception. He was the result of a system that prioritized image over authentic value. He began to speak. His voice retained its usual calm, but the pace was slower. "I called this meeting because we need to seriously discuss the school's next steps in response to the public reaction." No one replied. He continued. "As you can see, the video has gone viral across all platforms. We've received over 40 media inquiries, 3 invitations from international music institutions requesting to meet Tyler, and numerous letters from parents. Some supportive, some not. A parent, Mr. Fred Lawrence, known for his conservative views, spoke up. "Mr. Principal, I'm not denying the boy's talent, but aren't we risking the school's brand by letting this get too far? Fairhill is built on standards, on curated excellence. We can't let one unexpected situation derail years of careful positioning." A teacher next to him shot a glance but said nothing. The room stayed quiet. Collins didn't respond immediately. He understood what Mr. Lawrence meant, and he knew others in the room silently agreed. They didn't want disruption. They didn't want media attention. They wanted everything to return to normal. That's when Ms. Brenner stood up. "Excuse me, but I have to speak," she said, her eyes scanning the room, especially Principal Collins. "I've taught music here for 20 years. I've recommended dozens of students to top music programs, but not one, and I repeat, not one, has done what Tyler Morgan just did." No one interrupted. She went on. "We didn't discover him. We didn't support him. We didn't even know he had talent until he was pulled on stage as a joke. And now we're debating whether to publicly stand behind him because we're afraid it might tarnish our image?" Mr. Lawrence cleared his throat. "You're getting emotional." "No," Brenner cut in. Her voice was sharp and steady. "I'm being very clear-eyed. And if any of you had stood near that Steinway, heard the first note from that boy, seen the crowd's expression shift from ridicule to stunned silence, you'd understand. That wasn't genius. That was truth, buried for years." The oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. Someone signaled to pause the argument. Then a board member, Ms. Sylvia McAllister, spoke. She was respected throughout the institution and known for her progressive stance. "I agree with Ms. Brenner," she said quietly. "We cannot continue building this school's brand on curated perfection while pretending not to see reality. A school exists to discover and nurture talent, not to judge it by background or parental resume. She looked around the room. If we don't formally recognize Tyler Morgan, if we don't create a path for him to grow, then we are not Fairhill. We're just a stage built to spotlight a few, according to a script we wrote for them. The room fell into deep silence. Finally, Collins nodded. I will approve a special scholarship for Tyler, a personalized composition mentorship program, full tuition, access to accompaniment, equipment support, and the school will release an official statement acknowledging his talent and expressing our regret for having overlooked him. Mr. Lawrence objected, but no one seconded. He fell quiet. A vote was called, 10 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstained. Motion passed. In that moment, something shifted in the culture of Fairhill. A place once reserved only for those who fit the polished suit now began opening its doors to voices once dismissed as off-key. Miss Brenner left the room and returned to her office. On her desk lay the wrinkled sheet Tyler had given her, his first handwritten composition. She gently slipped it into a clear protective sleeve. She didn't want it torn, didn't want to lose a single note, because to her it wasn't just music, it was living evidence. That true talent doesn't come from report cards or resumes, it comes from souls that refuse to be silenced. That evening, an email went out to the entire school. Fairhill Academy officially recognizes Tyler Morgan as an exceptional student in our personalized composition program. He exemplifies perseverance, creativity, and the power to rise above adversity. Fairhill is committed to making space for voices that have gone unheard until now. Hundreds of students read that email. Some couldn't believe it. Some felt ashamed. Some felt relief because finally truth had been acknowledged. And Tyler? When Miss Brenner printed the email and handed it to him the next morning, he read up to the line "Personalized Composition Program," then folded the paper and asked softly, "Ma'am, if possible, could I get a new pair of headphones? Mine are broken." She smiled, but she knew. What Tyler needed wasn't headphones. He needed a world that finally knew how to listen. That morning, the halls of Fairhill bustled like any other day. Polished shoes clicked across ivory tiles, leather bags bumped against lockers, and greetings carried the air of a prestigious institution. But in one quiet corner, near the stairs leading up to the library, something had shifted. Tyler Morgan, the student once ignored, once the safe target for polite mockery, now walked through the crowd and no one dared to turn away. No one muttered, "Out of the way!" No one whispered, "It's him again!" No one laughed at the worn-out shoes he still wore. Instead, he passed by, and heads began to nod. Not all at once, not enthusiastically, just eyes that didn't avoid him anymore. A few stares held longer. Some students dipped their heads like belated greetings. In literature class, Tyler's seat was no longer accidentally placed next to the trash can. Dean, the football team captain, once always front row, slid his chair aside. "Want to sit here?" he asked. He didn't look Tyler in the eye, but the tone wasn't sarcastic. Tyler nodded slightly. "Thanks." Those were the first 2 words Dean had ever heard from him. That alone made Dean purse his lips and quietly turn away. No one clapped when Tyler walked in. No one rushed over for selfies or autographs. But the atmosphere had changed. His presence was no longer an awkward silence to be ignored, but a space people now hesitated to occupy too casually, a presence they had learned to respect. That afternoon, Tyler sat alone on the steps by the soccer field, a spot he often chose because no one else did. But this time, a small group approached. No noise, no phones out. Leah, the girl from the 3rd row in music class, came forward first. "I'm sorry," she said directly. "Last year, I laughed when I saw you composing with a pencil. I didn't know." Tyler looked up. There was no anger in his face, no surprise, just a soft response. "I don't hold grudges." A boy beside her, Jared, who had once called Tyler a system glitch during homeroom, sat next to him. He didn't say a word. He simply pulled out a folder from his backpack, set it down, and walked away. Inside was the piece Tyler had played on stage, now neatly transcribed, professionally formatted, and bound. On the front page was a single dedication. To Tyler, the one who made us look at ourselves. Tyler didn't smile, but he carried it with him all day. In the music room, the Steinway piano had a new sign posted. Do not use without teacher permission. But underneath, in handwritten ink, was a second line. Except Tyler. Ms. Brenner wrote it. That afternoon, when Tyler entered to practice, she simply said, "This room is yours from 4 to 5 p.m. daily. Lock the door if you want, or don't." Tyler approached the piano, but he didn't play right away. He looked around the room. A place that had been locked to him for 2 years, now open, not because of fame, but because truth could no longer be hidden. That day, a boy stood outside the doorway watching. He didn't enter. He listened for a few moments, then left. Tyler recognized him. The one who laughed the loudest when his name was first called on stage. But Tyler didn't feel anger. He just felt light. Because sometimes silence isn't exclusion. Sometimes silence is an unspoken admission. That evening, the school sent out its monthly email. Nominate your student of the month. Submissions were anonymous. Each student could vote for one person. Results to be announced the following week. Over 70% of students chose Tyler, not because he was suddenly popular, but because they saw something else, someone who stood without being lifted. And somehow they wanted to make amends, even just a little. When Principal Collins reviewed the tally, he nodded quietly in his office. He didn't write an apology letter. He didn't speak in front of the school or confess his mistake. He simply opened Tyler Morgan's personal record, scrolled to the bottom, and added one final note. Student of the month, not for grades, but for grit. Another hallway in the school changed too. The showcase wall of Fair Hill's Outstanding Students of the Year had been updated. It used to feature champions of athletics, debate winners, Ivy-bound scholars. Now a new frame had been added, not oversized but centered. Tyler Morgan. He wasn't in performance attire. He wasn't smiling. It was a photo of him at the piano, eyes closed, hands resting on the keys. Beneath the frame was a quote, "Music is how I speak when no one's listening." And that's exactly what happened. He didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't demand justice with fists or protest signs. He just played. And through that, he made those who once ignored him apologize, through actions, through looks, through quiet change. No formal apology was spoken, but everyone heard it. On the 10th day since the video of Tyler Morgan's performance was uploaded to social media, he officially appeared on the cover of the Boston Globe, under the Person of the Week feature. Not a pop star, not a CEO, not an inventor, just a 16-year-old student from Brookside, wearing a faded shirt, sitting at a piano with his hands on the keys, eyes closed, beneath the headline, "The Boy Who Made America Listen." Not long after, the New York Times published a feature, "Why Tyler Morgan's Performance Touched More Hearts Than Most Chart Toppers." A professor of music at Juilliard commented, "He doesn't just play with technique, he plays with a kind of longing that you can't turn away from." That evening, Anderson Cooper opened his broadcast with a 20-second clip of Tyler's performance. The studio fell completely silent. When the clip ended, Anderson simply said, "That is the sound of a generation long overlooked." YouTube's Tiny Desk Concerts extended an invitation for a live session. A music publisher offered to release his debut work. A representative from Berklee College of Music sent a letter offering a full future scholarship. At his aunt's house in Brookside, where the phone rarely rang, it now wouldn't stop ringing. Media, filmmakers, education organizations, all wanted to talk to Tyler, but he accepted none of it. When Miss Brenner asked him, "What do you want to do next?" he answered clearly, "I want to play that song again, where I wrote it." 3 days later, a small concert was held at the Brookside Community Center. No stage lights, no velvet seats, no VIP passes, just a few dozen plastic folding chairs, an upright piano borrowed from a nearby church, and a hand-painted banner. "Music belongs to everyone." Tyler entered from the side door. No introduction, no host. When he sat down, the room was still bustling. A baby cried. Someone's sandals slapped against the tile floor. But the moment he struck the first note, everything stopped. People who once sat beside him at bus stops, who once gave him discounted bread, who once shook their heads thinking he was too quiet to understand, now sat up straight, eyes fixed, ears attuned. When the piece ended, no one clapped at first. It was as if no one wanted to disturb what had just happened. Mr. Harlan stood up first, walked over, placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder, and said, "We didn't know we'd been listening to a great artist grow up right here." A mother carrying her daughter stepped forward and handed Tyler a small folded drawing. "She sketched you. She said you play music the way her grandfather used to tell stories. And he never studied music." Tyler smiled, accepted the drawing, folded it gently, and tucked it into the pocket of his old shirt. The small event wasn't live-streamed, no press coverage, no viral content. But there, in that quiet corner of Brookside, Tyler Morgan made his first big decision. Instead of releasing a solo album, he would write a new piece for the Brookside community, to be performed for the first time at the old vacant lot behind his former elementary school. The plan spread quickly. Volunteers signed up to help. A group of Fair Hill students joined in to help build a temporary stage. Ms. Brenner secured a grant from the local Composers Guild for basic sound equipment. When the day arrived, over 500 people showed up, from surrounding neighborhoods and even from Fair Hill. Some drove nearly 2 hours to attend. No one wore designer suits, but everyone brought the same thing: a desire to listen and the belief that kindness still matters. Tyler stepped onto the stage. A simple floodlight glowed from a borrowed spotlight. He wore a white shirt, jeans, and his usual worn canvas shoes. He didn't say much, just approached the mic and said, "I wrote this for my mom, but I'm playing it for all of you." Then the second piece began. This time, it wasn't about pain, it was about healing. Not a lonely whisper, but a shared anthem, even if only one person played it. As Tyler reached the final movement, a group of Brookside children in the front row, faces bright, swayed gently to the rhythm. And in that moment, all boundaries melted. Between rich and poor, between GPA and raw instinct, between tradition and truth. Gone. The next day, the second piece, titled "For Those Who Stayed," was posted for free on Fair Hill Academy's homepage, accompanied by a single caption, composed by Tyler Morgan, for his mother and for all those who were never heard. The piece was quickly downloaded by public schools across the country for use in their music programs. A music teacher in Oklahoma wrote, "For the first time, my students are learning a piece they feel was written for them." A classical radio station in Chicago aired the piece during their evening hour with the introduction, "Not all music is played in concert halls, but some pieces, when played at the right moment, in the right place, can heal an entire city." As for Tyler, he returned to school as usual. No crowds asking for pictures, but every hallway he walked through came with a look of recognition. Not fear, not curiosity, but quiet respect. One afternoon, upon entering the music room, he noticed a second piano had been placed beside the old one. Attached to it, a small plaque. "Gifted to Tyler, so you can keep writing what no one else has dared to say." Signed at the bottom, "From all of us." After Tyler Morgan's performance at the old lot behind Brookside Elementary, his name was no longer just circulating in lifestyle columns or inspiration segments. 1 week later, he appeared on the cover of Education Today with the headline, "The Boy Who Redefined Equal Education." But to Tyler, titles meant less than one simple sentence he heard from a fifth-grade boy. "I always thought kids like us were never meant to sit on a stage." That sentence kept Tyler up all night, not because he was emotional, but because he realized something urgent and clear. If music can make a child believe they deserve to be seen, then it can't remain a privilege for the few. 3 weeks later, Tyler submitted his first proposal to Fair Hill, a program called Silent Notes, where students from underserved areas who'd never studied formal music would be guided to compose and perform their first piece. No competitions, no grading, just to be heard. He didn't write it in fancy language, no academic jargon, no polished pitch decks, just one line in the description. "We can't restore justice if we don't start by giving people a place to speak." At first, the administration thought it was symbolic, a gesture, but the number of applications from Brookside, Westbridge, and Arlington tripled projections. A 12-year-old girl wrote in her form, "I never thought I'd be allowed to play piano without people saying I'm pretending to be fancy. I just want my mom to hear me play before her surgery." A boy added, "I don't have a piano, But I remember every note my dad played before he was deported. Tyler read every application. And for the first time since his mother's passing, he cried, not from sorrow, but because the truth was still there. So many children carry music in their hearts, but no one opens the door for it to come out. Ms. Brenner, seeing the surge in interest, offered to give up 2 of her weekly classes to support the program. An alumnus of Fairhill donated used instruments. The Brookside Veterans Association helped repair an abandoned rehearsal hall to use as a performance space. Within 3 months, Silent Notes became the fastest-growing community music project in Massachusetts. No flashy logo, no big brand sponsors, just music and people. On the first day of the very first class, Tyler stood in front of 18 children, ranging from 5th to 11th grade, inside a once dilapidated room now coated in fresh paint. On the wall, a handwritten sign Tyler had taped up with masking tape read, "This is not a classroom. This is a place where you don't have to be right to be heard." He didn't lecture on theory, no technical tests. He simply said, "I learned music by memory and pain. If you have something to say, start with any note. Then, keep going." A Haitian girl gently placed her fingers on the piano keys. She didn't know chords, but she played the lullaby her grandmother used to hum before she passed. The room went silent. Then applause. A boy of Salvadoran descent wrote a short rap about the day police stopped him on the way to school. Tyler didn't correct a thing. He just said, "That's the first song you've ever written, and it's the truth." In every session, there were no textbooks. Each student recorded their own sounds, practiced, messed up, tried again, then stood up and performed for each other. Each child had a notebook called My Book. No one was allowed to read anyone else's. Inside, they wrote notes, lyrics, hand sketches, whatever they wanted. After 6 weeks, Tyler organized their first showcase at the community center. No reserved seating, no name tags, just a simple banner. First concert, not the last. Each student came up and performed their first piece. No one was scored. No one was ranked. Each song was a story. A father who left. A night spent sleeping in a park. A dream of a stage. An anger that had no name. When the night ended, Tyler stepped on stage last. He didn't sit at the piano. He held the microphone and said, "8 months ago, I stood on another stage, not to tell my story, but to be laughed at. And if it hadn't been for the music that day, I might still be silent today. But what I find most beautiful now is not that I was finally heard, but that dozens of kids don't have to go through what I did just to be seen." The room stood up. No chants, no slogans. Just a moment where everyone realized justice doesn't arrive from the top down. It begins by listening to a note that was once ignored. 3 weeks later, Silent Notes was officially recognized by the Massachusetts Department of Education as a pioneering pilot model for non-academic justice in schools. A state senator wrote, "This isn't just music, it's democracy, set to melody." The national broadcast replayed the concert. But the most shared clip wasn't any performance. It was the moment a child of African descent stood on stage, cradled a ukulele with both arms, and with a trembling voice, read from a piece of paper. "I don't know how to write music, but I know the sound of my mother crying at night, and this is the first song to show her that I'm still listening." After the concert, Tyler quietly boarded the last bus of the day. In his hands was a My Book notebook, given to him by a shy girl who hadn't yet found the courage to perform. She asked him to read it first. Tyler opened it. On the first page was a single line, "I don't know how to play piano, but thanks to you, I know. I was never truly silent." That May, just as spring's last chill receded from Massachusetts, a quiet concert was held at Fairhill Academy. Not in the grand auditorium, no elaborate guest list, no big promotion, but everyone knew this was the final performance of the school year. And Tyler Morgan would be playing his third piece. No one knew what the piece was. Tyler hadn't mentioned it. He hadn't rehearsed it at school. He hadn't whispered a note to his teachers. But Ms. Brenner knew. She didn't need to ask. She had seen him spend hours in the music room, not playing, just writing. His pen moved slowly and steadily, as if stitching together memories, note by note. Tyler didn't invite the media. He simply sent handwritten letters to 10 people. People he wanted present for this one final moment before the year closed. One of those letters went to Mr. Leroy Bennett, the school's longtime custodian. It read, "I don't know if you remember the first time I sketched chords behind the school. You told me music doesn't need a certificate. I never forgot that. This piece is for you. And for my mom. I'll only play it once." Mr. Leroy arrived early. He sat in the second row, wearing his familiar gray knit cap and worn brown coat. No phone, no camera. Only an old notebook, its first page containing a song he wrote in his youth. The small hall quickly filled. Students lined the walls. Some teachers sat on folding chairs in the back. No one complained, because they all knew they were about to witness something that wouldn't happen again. Tyler walked in, not in concert attire, just a pale blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, dark jeans, and his signature faded canvas shoes, now an unspoken symbol at Fairhill. He sat at the piano, no microphone, no introduction, just a deep breath, and his fingers on the keys. The first note rang out, and in that instant it became clear. This wasn't a performance, it was a remembrance, a farewell, a final conversation with the silence that had swallowed him for years. The melody began with a small motif, like a sentence interrupted. But it didn't repeat. It grew, like someone learning how to name their pain, and then letting it go. His left hand struck single, solemn notes, simple like footsteps in a hallway. His right hand wove a thread that bound broken parts together. Halfway through, the music shifted to a major key, brighter, more resolved, yet still touched with sorrow. Listeners didn't know what the piece was about, but somehow they all felt like they had lived it. In the second row, Mr. Leroy sat upright, his eyes red, his gloved hands trembling with the rhythm. No one in the room breathed too loudly. No chairs creaked. No whispers broke the stillness. The piece lasted nearly 8 minutes. No drama, no climax. But it touched something few sounds can. The feeling of regret, finally forgiven. When the final note floated out, barely more than a breath, Tyler withdrew his hands, bowed his head. He didn't rise, didn't wait for applause. He just placed his palms on his knees and closed his eyes. Then Mr. Leroy stood. The first clap came from his hands, slow, steady, full of gratitude. One by one, the room rose to their feet, not in unison, not out of obligation, but because no one wanted to stay seated after hearing something too real to ignore. Ms. Brenner quietly wiped her glasses. Another teacher whispered, "That was a symphony for those who aren't here to hear it." After the concert, Tyler didn't speak. He walked over to Mr. Leroy, placed a hand gently on his shoulder, his first time hugging anyone at school. Mr. Leroy didn't say a word. He simply placed his hand on Tyler's head and nodded. 1 week later, Fairhill published Tyler's final piece under the title, Lorraine's Requiem, a farewell for Mother Lorraine. The score was sent, free of charge, to public high schools across the state. On the cover, there was no photo of Tyler, just a line, handwritten. "Music is how I keep the ones who've left, so the ones who remain remember. Every voice, no matter how small, deserves to be heard in full." Months later, on a quiet summer morning, Tyler boarded a long-distance bus headed south. No announcement, no goodbye. He carried 3 things, a keyboard, a blank notebook, and the original composition never yet printed. He wasn't leaving. He was going to keep writing. Back at Fairhill, silent notes continued. Under the leadership of the students Tyler once taught, the program expanded to 3 more schools. Each month, a child plays their very first song. No permission needed, no selection process. And whenever someone asks, "Who started this?" they simply say, "A boy played his first song," when everyone expected to laugh. Tyler Morgan never shouted for justice. He simply sat down and played his song. In a world addicted to noise, he chose silence. In an education system obsessed with structure, he took the side road, and that is what made him change everything. Not with power, not with position, but with a single note, played when no one expected it. He didn't just reclaim justice for himself, He created space for hundreds of other children to step into the light. Children once graded wrong, silence for not fitting the mold. And in the end, the real shock wasn't that Tyler Morgan became famous. It was that an entire system almost missed him, because he didn't look like one of the chosen. What about you? Leave a comment below. Have you ever known a Tyler Morgan in your life? Or were you the one who was dismissed just because you didn't fit the mold? If this story resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs a little more hope today. Because maybe your voice today is exactly what someone else needs. To believe that their voice, however quiet, is loud enough to move the world.